arrogant CEO laughed at his unfashionable employee. Those were the exact words echoing through the marble lobby of Halden and Royce that cold Friday morning. Employees froze. Conversations stopped. And there she stood, holding a paper cup of tap water and a folder she couldn't afford to replace, wearing the same worn coat she'd patched 3 times. His joke cut through the air, sharp enough for everyone to hear, loud enough for her to feel. She didn't answer. She simply looked at him once, quiet, steady, before walking away. But no one knew what she was planning for the gala that night. Mara Ellison had lived her entire 28 years on the south edge of Chicago, in a narrow third-floor walk-up that always smelled faintly of boiled rice and old radiator heat. She shared the place with her younger brother, Kyle, whose community college tuition was the reason she worked 2 jobs and stretched every dollar until it nearly tore. Most mornings began the same way, a 40-minute bus ride at dawn, gloves tucked under her arms to stay warm, followed by her quiet walk into Halden and Royce, the corporate world that existed in another universe just 6 miles north. She was an administrative coordinator by title, but in truth, Mara handled whatever the company overlooked: last-minute catering, scheduling chaos, broken event setups, and the emotional shrapnel left behind by stressed executives. Her clothes came from second-hand stores, tailored by her own needle late at night. She carried herself carefully, always aware of how eyes scanned her, assessing what she wasn't. Her mother had once worked housekeeping for a downtown hotel until illness took her strength. Before passing, she repeated a single phrase that carved itself into Mara's bones: "Hold your ground, even if your voice shakes." Mara had lived by it ever since, repeating it silently during performance reviews, job interviews, landlord arguments, and every moment something in her world felt too big. At Halden and Royce, the phrase was her lifeline. She never fit the corporate mold. Not the polished look, not the expensive posture, not the conversations filled with vacation homes and designer names she couldn't pronounce. While others ordered sparkling water and catered lunches, Mara filled her reused bottle from the tap and ate the same turkey sandwich she made for $2.15 a day. Every contrast reminded her of the divide she walked through daily: wealth above her, struggle below her, and she pushing forward somewhere in the middle. Still, she believed in work done with dignity. She believed that effort mattered, that decency held value, even when no one saw it. She believed that people could rise quietly, without stepping on anyone to get there. That belief, along with her mother's creed, was why she stayed at Halden and Royce, despite the long hours, the missed family dinners, and the invisible weight of being judged before she even spoke. But the gala invitation changed everything. It wasn't meant for someone like her, and yet it was now the one chance she couldn't afford to lose. Mara never expected her name to land on the internal list for the Halden and Royce Winter Benefactors Gala. She had been assigned to assist with logistics, stage prep, guest routing, and emergency fixes, but the final memo included one unexpected line: all coordination staff required to attend. For most employees, it meant a night of networking and polished photos. For Mara, it meant something far more fragile: a chance, maybe her only one, to be seen as more than the girl who fetched last-minute chargers and fixed coffee spills. Senior partners, board members, and program directors would all be there. If she carried herself right, if she looked the part, she might finally earn a real promotion. Something stable, something that could cover rent without choosing between groceries and utility bills. But if she failed, if she looked out of place or drew the wrong kind of attention, it would set her back in ways she couldn't afford. She had exactly $6.25 left in her weekly budget, an amount she'd counted twice before deciding she couldn't spend it on anything new to wear. So she pinned her hopes on the one thing she still had, her mother's creed echoing softly inside her. Hold your ground, even if your voice shakes. The humiliation arrived fast, sharp and public, exactly the way things seemed to unfold in places where hierarchy mattered more than truth. On the morning before the gala, Mara carried a box of event materials through the executive corridor, a place she rarely entered. Her steps were small, careful. She didn't want to disturb the hush of wealth that always lived there. The carpet was thicker, the air colder, the conversations quieter, as if even sound felt richer on this floor. She had just reached the corner when the voices rose. "Is that what she's wearing to the gala?" Jonathan Mercer, the CEO, said loudly enough for the entire hall to hear. His tone carried the effortless cruelty of someone who had never wondered about money or dignity or the cost of embarrassment. A few executives chuckled. Mara froze mid-step, the box heavy in her arms. Jonathan wasn't finished. "She's coordinating the event, not bussing tables. Someone tell HR to explain the difference." Her cheeks flushed hot. The coat she had patched last night suddenly felt like a billboard for everything she lacked. She swallowed once, but the words couldn't move. Before she could speak, Jonathan added casually to his assistant, "Make sure she's not standing near the donors." "We can't have anyone thinking." He gestured vaguely toward Mara, dismissing her with an open palm wave. "That we hire just anyone. Just anyone." The words hit harder than the laughter. But the real blow came next. Quiet, almost hidden. His assistant, frowning sympathetically at him, said, "I heard she pushed herself onto the guest list. HR said she insisted she belonged there." A lie. A clean, easy lie. And suddenly the stares shifted, from amused to irritated, from entertained to judgmental. Mara's throat tightened. She wanted to correct it. She wanted to defend herself. She wanted to explain that she was required to attend, that she worked harder than anyone in that hallway, that she hadn't asked for anything. But Jonathan spoke over the moment, sealing it. "Well, that settles it," he said. "Make sure she's kept out of sight." That line, "out of sight," cut through her, slicing her fragile hope in two. No promotion, no opportunity. No chance to be seen for her work, her effort, her quiet resilience. Just a joke, a burden, a warning about who didn't belong. She stood very still, gripping the box until her fingers ached. Her mother's creed tried to rise inside her, but the words trembled too much to grab hold. And yet, as she turned away from the laughter, something in her chest hardened. Not broken, but reshaped. This wasn't the end of the story. It was the moment she refused to disappear. Jonathan Mercer didn't think of himself as cruel. In his mind, comments were tools, quick corrections to keep the company polished, efficient, controlled. He grew up in the kind of world where honesty meant bluntness, and bluntness was framed as integrity. His father always said, "Precision wins. Sentiment slows you down." Jonathan inherited that belief like a badge. That morning, he had been reviewing the final donor list. Irritated by last-minute changes and a call from the board questioning the gala's budget. He hated budget questions. They always made him feel cornered, as if people doubted his competence. When he stepped into the corridor and saw Mara, coat frayed, shoes dull, box wobbling in her hands, his mind registered only one thing: disorder. He didn't notice her quiet strength. He didn't register the exhaustion in her eyes. He didn't consider that she might be carrying more weight than the box she held. She became, in an instant, the embodiment of his stress, a problem in the wrong place at the wrong time. So he spoke, too quickly, too loudly. But he didn't expect it to land the way it did. As Mara stiffened, Jonathan caught a flicker of something, pain, maybe, or pride, before she dropped her gaze. The executives laughed, but he didn't. Not exactly. He smirked, because it was easier than acknowledging discomfort. His assistant's comment about Mara forcing herself onto the guest list slid past him as background noise. He didn't question it, didn't verify it. He wanted the problem gone. An assumption was faster than truth. But when Mara turned away, Jonathan noticed something he hadn't expected. The way she walked. Not hurried, not crumbling, just restrained, steady, like someone holding a door shut against a storm raging inside. Something about that image unsettled him. He watched longer than he meant to. The executives drifted back into their offices, but he remained in the hallway, hand resting on the edge of a glass table. Jaw tightening around an emotion he refused to name. Regret? No, he didn't do regret. He told himself it was irritation, at HR, at logistics, at people making assumptions that complicated his day. Still, the moment stuck. A small echo, quiet but constant, as if the hallway hadn't fully released it. He caught sight of the box she carried. Gala materials, required attendance, not self-invited. The lie his assistant repeated suddenly didn't sit as comfortably. Jonathan exhaled slowly, as if brushing away a thought he didn't want. But the thought stayed, because for the first time, he wondered if he had misjudged her. And worse, if others had watched him do it. The shift began in the employee cafeteria, a place where conversations usually blurred into a low hum of microwaves, tapping keyboards and plastic trays. Today, the air felt strangely sharp. Word of the hallway incident moved faster than the lunch line, carried by whispers that grew heavier with each retelling. Mara sat alone at a corner table, her sandwich untouched, her thoughts folded in on themselves, like a closing fist. She wasn't crying. She refused to. But the silence around her felt loud with what she couldn't say. Then, unexpectedly, someone slid into the seat across from her. It was Daniel Wu from Facilities, a man everyone respected because he spoke little but noticed everything. His uniform shirt was worn at the collar, his badge scratched, but his presence carried the quiet certainty of someone anchored in reality. "Mara," he said softly, "stand up." She blinked. "Why?" "Just do." Before she could argue, Daniel turned toward the cafeteria. Conversations slowed. Heads turned. He raised his voice, something he rarely did. "For anyone who didn't know," he said, "Mara has been the one fixing everyone's mess for the gala. Without her, nothing would be ready tonight. Not the lights, not the schedules, not the seating." He lifted an envelope she hadn't noticed he was holding. "And since people seem confused, here's HR's official memo. Required attendance. Required." She didn't ask for anything. Murmurs rippled across the room. Surprise, discomfort, recognition. Mara felt her pulse thud in her throat. This wasn't what she wanted. Attention, even in her defense, still felt like exposure. "Daniel," she started, but he wasn't done. He looked toward the doorway, where Jonathan stood frozen with a coffee in hand, caught halfway into the cafeteria. The room shifted around him like a tide pulling back. "Some folks talk about professionalism," Daniel continued steadily. "But Mara has been showing it every day, even when others don't." The line landed with quiet force. Not an attack, just truth. Jonathan stiffened. He wasn't used to being named without being directly addressed. The cafeteria waited for his reaction, the weight of expectation pressing into the space. He cleared his throat, "That's enough," he said, but even the words sounded thinner than usual. Daniel didn't challenge him. He simply nodded once, as if the message had already been delivered. Then, he placed the HR memo on Mara's table and left. The act wasn't loud, it wasn't dramatic, but it was public, undeniable, and unignorable. For the first time, people saw Mara not as the invisible girl in a patched coat, but as someone worth standing up for. And Jonathan felt the shift like a crack in a polished surface, revealing a truth he couldn't easily dismiss. Mara didn't go straight back to her desk after the cafeteria incident. Her hands were shaking too much. Instead, she took the elevator down to the loading dock, the one place in the building that felt honest. The scent of cardboard, cold concrete, and machine oil grounded her better than any polished conference room ever could. Her uncle, Ray Ellison, was already there, repairing a faulty pallet jack. He worked part-time for the building's maintenance team, his broad shoulders hunched, his gray hair tucked beneath a worn cap. He looked up the second she walked in. "You're early for break," he said, though his eyes had already registered the storm inside her. What happened? Mara tried to swallow the truth. But it rose anyway. The sea in front of everyone. And people believed a lie about me. Daniel stepped in. But Uncle Ray sighed, wiping his hands on a rag. "Sit," she did. The metal chair was cold, the air colder. "You know what your mama used to tell me?" he said. "Same thing she told you. Hold your ground, even if your voice shakes." Mara nodded, bitterness creeping up her throat. "I tried. Today it didn't feel like enough." Ray studied her carefully. "Because you're mixing up ground with silence." She frowned. "What does that mean?" "It means you're standing still, letting people walk through you, hoping the world notices your dignity on its own." He tapped her knee lightly. "Dignity doesn't mean disappearing. It means showing up, even when someone tries to shrink you." The words hit harder. Ray leaned back, expression softening. "Mara, survival is not the same as living right. You think I haven't been talked down to? You think I haven't swallowed words just to keep my paycheck? Sure, but I learned something. When you allow people to decide your worth, they don't stop. They just get bolder." She felt that like a bruise pressed too soon. "And Jonathan?" she asked quietly. Ray shrugged. "He's a man who's forgotten where he stands. High floors make people dizzy." They mistake altitude for ability. He held her gaze. "So remind him, without fear, without spite, just truth." Mara inhaled slowly. The loading dock hummed behind them, forklifts beeping, boxes shifting, workers calling to each other. It was the symphony of people who labored without applause. "Hold your ground," Ray said again, softer this time. "But lift your voice when it's needed." For the first time all day, she felt the words land, not as comfort, but as a call to action. Jonathan found Mara later that afternoon in a small storage office behind the event floor, where extra table linens and emergency toolkits were stacked in crooked towers. She was sorting through clipboards, her movements precise and controlled. Too controlled, the way someone behaves when emotion is trying to force its way out. He stood in the doorway for a moment, unsure how to begin. Apologies weren't something he practiced. In his world, they were weaknesses, liabilities, cracks in armor. "Mara," he said finally. She didn't look up. "I'm busy." He stepped inside anyway. "About earlier." "No," she cut in, voice steadier than she felt. "Not here. Not after a crowd had to remind you I'm a person." His jaw tightened. "That's not what happened." "Isn't it?" She placed a clipboard down with a sharp tap. "You believed a lie about me because it was convenient. You spoke about me like I wasn't standing 3 feet away. You laughed." "I didn't laugh," he interrupted. "You didn't stop anyone who did," she shot back. Silence pulsed between them. Jonathan exhaled slowly. Look, I was under pressure. The board. Everyone's under pressure, she said. That doesn't give you a license to step on people smaller than you. Her bluntness startled him. Most people softened their words around him, cushioned them, hid the sharp edges. Mara didn't. She had nothing to lose. That man, Daniel, he embarrassed you, Jonathan said. But he did it to protect you. You should be grateful. Mara turned sharply. Grateful? For someone recognizing the truth? You think dignity is charity? You think speaking up for me is some kind of favor? Jonathan hesitated, suddenly aware that he had misjudged the terrain of this conversation. I didn't say that. You implied it. She crossed her arms. What you don't understand, Jonathan, is that charity comes from above. Respect comes from across. He blinked, thrown by the precision of her words. She continued, quieter now, but sharper. I don't need you to protect me. I don't need your pity. I just need you to stop making my job harder than it already is. Jonathan stepped back slightly, as if the room had shifted. I wasn't pitying you. Then what were you doing? Mara asked. He didn't have an answer, at least not one he was willing to admit. The truth, unwelcome and raw, was that he had acted without thought, using her as an outlet for frustrations she had nothing to do with. He hated realizing it. Mara returned to her clipboards, signaling the conversation was done. But her final words stayed suspended in the small office like a held breath. I don't want charity, Jonathan. I want fairness. And for the first time he realized he didn't actually know how to give that. By late afternoon, the gala preparations reached a level of chaos that left no room for egos, grudges, or lingering tension. A shipping mishap delayed half the decorations, the lighting contractor backed out due to a wiring issue, and the donor tables were misnumbered, problems that would have taken a full team to fix. Except the team was gone. A storm warning had forced most vendors to leave early. Only essential staff remained, which meant Mara and Jonathan. The event director, panicked and pale, shoved a stack of binders into their hands. You two, she said, pointing between them like a referee about to drop a whistle, are handling the entire floor setup until the vendors return. If we don't get this back on track, the board will have my badge. Jonathan opened his mouth to protest. He didn't do manual labor, not in his Brioni suit. But Mara had already walked off with the first binder and a toolbox. The message was clear. Work first. Talk never. He followed. The next 2 hours unfolded in a rhythm neither expected. Not warm, not comfortable, but aligned. They mapped table arrangements, flagged fire hazard issues, recalibrated the lighting grid using a battered stepladder, and sorted mislabeled donor gifts. Mara moved with efficiency born of necessity. Jonathan moved with an intensity driven by pride. Their skills clashed at first, her practicality against his perfectionism. But slowly, something shifted. At one point, Jonathan struggled with a jammed extension rack. Mara stepped beside him, loosened 2 hidden screws with a small wrench, and freed the mechanism with one clean motion. How did you? He began. She didn't look at him. I fix things. It's what I do. He absorbed that, filing it somewhere between respect and discomfort. For the first time, he saw her competence not as background noise, but as structure, the thing quietly holding everything together. Later, while adjusting centerpiece placements, Mara noticed him sorting table cards alphabetically without being asked. You're organized, she said carefully. He paused. I like control. When things work, I work. It was the closest thing he'd ever said that resembled vulnerability. As the hour stretched, they talked in fragmented moments, brief exchanges about logistics, timing, last-minute changes. Not personal, not sentimental, but something in the tone softened, the edges less jagged than before. When the lights finally lit correctly across the hall, washing the room in steady gold, Mara exhaled in relief. Jonathan watched her for a second longer than necessary, not with pity, not with superiority, but with recognition. They didn't smile at each other. They didn't shake hands. They simply stood in the quiet glow of a crisis they'd salvaged together. It wasn't friendship. It was the beginning of understanding. The ballroom had settled into an uneasy stillness, the kind that comes only after the storm of frantic preparation. Workers cleared out. The final checks were complete, and the gold uplights hummed softly against the high ceiling. Mara stayed behind to finish small details, straightening a podium card, securing a loose cable, counting the chairs one last time. Jonathan lingered too, not because he needed to, but because something in the quiet pressed on him, urging him to stay. For a moment, neither spoke. The gala hall looked perfect, flawless, exactly what Jonathan demanded from the world. Yet somehow, standing in the open space, perfection felt heavier than triumph. "Why do you push this hard?" Mara asked suddenly, her voice low but curious, not confrontational. She didn't look at him. She kept adjusting a centerpiece that wasn't crooked. He hesitated. He could give a polished answer, leadership, standards, investor expectations, but he felt the weight of the day, the cracks in his armor widening. "The board doesn't trust me as much as they pretend," he admitted. "Every quarter, I feel them watching, waiting for a slip. I can't afford mistakes. Not one." It wasn't the kind of truth he shared with anyone, let alone her. Mara paused, turning toward him. "So you control everything you can, even people." He swallowed the instinct to defend himself. Maybe. A quiet understanding flickered between them, though neither fully grasped it yet. She sat on the edge of a guest chair, exhaustion pulling her shoulders forward. "I'm always one bill away from losing my apartment," she said. "Everything I do, every hour I work, it's to keep things from falling apart. If I mess up once, my brother's tuition goes, our home goes, everything." Jonathan sank into the chair beside her, not too close, but not distant either. "So you carry your whole life, all the time." "So do you," she replied gently. He looked down at his hands, hands expected to sign perfect deals, make flawless decisions, avoid human error, hands that rarely touched anything. "We're not on the same level," he said quietly, "but it feels like we're stuck for different reasons." Mara nodded. "Everyone thinks you're untouchable, and everyone thinks I'm invisible." The truth hovered between them, unexpected, disarming. Two people, both cornered by expectations bigger than their bodies, one by too much power, the other by too little. Jonathan exhaled slowly. Maybe that's why today hit harder than it should have. "Maybe," she said, "but seeing it doesn't erase what happened." "I know," his voice steadied, "but it might change what comes next." For the first time, neither of them felt alone in the empty hall. Not allies, not friends, just two people finally seeing the walls around the other, and the identical cracks running through them. The gala began with the usual shimmer of wealth: crystal flutes, tailored suits, practiced smiles. Donors drifted through the ballroom, complementing the decor Jonathan and Mara had spent hours rescuing. Mara stayed near the back, blending into the staff line, her patched coat replaced by a simple black dress borrowed from a neighbor. Plain, but dignified. Jonathan stepped onto the stage to welcome the guests. His speech was scripted, safe, until he caught sight of Mara near the lighting console. For a moment, the memory of the hallway humiliation flashed through him, sharp and unwelcome. He cleared his throat. "Before we begin," he said, There's someone here tonight who deserves acknowledgement. Conversations stilled. Eyes followed his gesture toward Mara. Her stomach tightened. This event, Jonathan continued, would have fallen apart without her. She wasn't just required to attend. She carried this gala on her back. Any mistake you don't see tonight is because she prevented it. A ripple of surprise moved through the room. Executives, donors, staff. Mara stood frozen, heat rising to her face. Jonathan stepped aside, letting the spotlight fall subtly toward her. A reversal of power he didn't hide or qualify. For the first time, she wasn't invisible, and he wasn't untouchable. The next morning, the lobby of Halden and Royce felt different. Not quieter, not louder, just changed, as if the building itself remembered what had happened the night before. The same marble floors, the same polished glass walls, the same rush of well-dressed employees. But something in the air carried a new shape. Mara entered through the revolving doors, carrying the same old coat she'd worn the day Jonathan mocked her. The stitching on the sleeve, the worn buttons, nothing about it had transformed overnight. But she had. As she walked across the lobby, employees nodded to her. Small acknowledgments, quiet respect. Not pity, not charity, recognition. Even the ones who had once looked through her offered subtle greetings. Near the elevator bank, Jonathan waited, not standing tall the way he usually did, not radiating control, just waiting, hands loosely in his pockets, posture open, expression unreadable. "Mara," he said. She stopped a safe distance away. "Good morning." He nodded, searching for the right tone. "The board saw the gala reports. They know how much of it was your work. I made sure they did." She held his gaze, wary but steady. "Thank you. This doesn't erase what I said," he added, "but I hope it's a start." For a moment, neither spoke. The lobby buzzed around them, echoes of the very space where humiliation had first hit her like a blow. Now the same ground felt strangely level, unchanged in structure, but transformed in meaning. Mara reached into her coat pocket and felt the familiar edge of the $6.25 she hadn't touched. Yesterday, it symbolized scarcity. Today, somehow, it symbolized choice. She met his eyes. "My mother used to say, 'Hold your ground, even if your voice shakes.'" Yesterday, I think we both learned what that means. Jonathan nodded once, accepting the truth in her words. As she stepped into the elevator, she didn't feel small. She didn't feel invisible. She felt exactly where she was meant to stand. And as the doors closed, Jonathan remained in place, quiet, thoughtful, seeing her clearly for the first time. The same lobby, the same coat, but a different story now written on both. Some stories don't end with grand victories or perfect justice. Sometimes they end with something quieter. Someone finally being seen. Someone finally standing tall. Someone finally holding their ground. Mara didn't win riches or fame, but she walked out of that building with her dignity restored, her voice steady, and her worth undeniable. And sometimes, that's the kind of triumph that stays with us the longest. If this story made you pause, made you feel something, or reminded you of your own quiet strength, like, subscribe, and stay with us for the knee.